Welcome
All right.
back to another episode of Protalks. We are so excited to be sitting down today with Justin Gallaway. He's a maintenance leader at International Paper in South Carolina and also a preacher. You'll find out more about that later. Today, we're talking about Justin's tips for managing a crazy on-call schedule while being the best leader he can be for his team. We know this is something that our pros struggle with too, being the owner of your own businesses. There is no rest. You are constantly on call no matter what. So talking about some tactical tips on how to keep your sanity and be able to show up in both your personal life for your family and for your employees without absolutely losing it. And then we're also going to be talking about how you can continue to find areas of opportunity to learn in your career that you've spent so many years in, the majority of your life in, so you don't burn out and you'll still love your life's work in this business that you built. So, Justin, we're going to go right into our Ligtenberg Greenberg round, and we want to get to know Justin in a minute. So I'm going to start us off. Where did you grow up?
Well, if you would probably have to go to Google Maps to find it. I grew up on the other end of the state from Mac Story. I actually grew up in a town called Sneed, Alabama, and it's very, very small. It had a four-way stop, and that was about it. So
Wow.
It was 30 minutes either direction to get to a Walmart. That's how small it was.
Population 842. He is not joking when he says that.
And that's probably counting the cows.
Double counting the cows too. Justin, what's your proudest accomplishment so far in your life?
My proudest accomplishment would probably be my two children. I've got a 15-year-old son and a 13-year-old daughter, and just seeing the lives that they're living thrills me every day to see how they interact with people and even how they're stepping up to be leaders and to encourage others and help others.
That's awesome. And if you could do one activity for the rest of your life, what would it be?
One activity, that would have to be investing in people, whether it's doing leadership development or preaching, either one, just investing in people and pouring into other people's lives. I would probably explode if I couldn't do that.
That would make it your one activity for the rest of your life, for sure. Justin, what is your favorite family vacation? It could be a spot. It could be a set of activities. What is it?
Actually, probably my favorite vacation it was me and my wife, and we took a trip up north, and we caught a cruise coming out of New York, going up the eastern seaboard. But the trip, getting to the trip was the fun part, because a little country boy had never been to a big city. We flew into New York late, and basically had to rustle up a cab driver because they were arguing over waiting on the big groups to take the two of us all the way across New York to catch our boat before it left. I think probably 3 or 4 pedestrians died, and they probably hit at least 4 or 5 bicycles trying to fly across the state or the city. And then once we got there, we literally ran down the port to get onto the boat right as they were fixing to pull the gangplank back across. And then
wow.
The cool thing after that was going out of the harbor and getting to see the Statue of Liberty. I'm a very patriotic person and grew up to really respect our country, and getting to see Lady Liberty like that was an awesome thing.
I'm sure that must have been quite the view after that chaotic trip in that taxi cab.
And it was good to calm the nerves to go out on the cruise and get out of there for a little while.
For sure. For sure. Justin, what is something a lot of people don't know about you?
So something they don't know is, in my younger days, I decided to ride bulls. So I tried riding bulls, and I wanted to prove to myself that I could do it. So I got on it, and on the second bull I rode, I didn't make the 8 seconds, but when it flipped me off, I got stepped on, ripped my pants, and then had to prove to myself I could do it again. So I decided I was going to overcome that fear. And I rode a third time, and I actually made my 8 seconds, and then I retired before I died. So I wanted to conquer that fear and try it, and I did it. And it was a blast, but not something a guy my age would want to try now.
Thrill seeker. Oh my God. I can't.
I don't think I would last a second. Yeah, there's no way. All right. Last question here in the Ligtenberg Greenberg round. What is a skill or talent that you wish you had?
So I was reviewing these questions a little bit ago with my wife, and when I mentioned that one, she died laughing, and she said, if you ask me, it would be finding something. I was like, really? So if a thing has a place it's supposed to be, I'm not necessarily OCD, but if an object has a place it's supposed to be and it's not there, I can't find it. It's like I keep going back, going, it should be here, it should be here, it should be here. So she had a good laugh. She said, if you don't say that one, you're crazy, because that would be one skill that I would wish you had. So,
okay, that's the best answer. That's the best answer we've gotten for that question, for sure.
Yeah, definitely big points. Well, let's get into the meat of the interview here, Justin. So I'm curious, I'd love to just learn a little bit more about yourself. If you could tell the listeners here and then the viewers kind of what your background is in the trade fields, and maybe a little bit about like what your job as like a maintenance supervisor at International Paper looks like from a day-to-day perspective, and how big is your team, and tell us a little bit more about that so our viewers can get kind of that insider scoop on what makes you during the day.
Okay. I'd love to do that. My background is, if you go into the maintenance field, my background covers the whole gamut of it. I've done everything from hardware maintenance, sold hardware as a young child. I've done apartment maintenance. I've worked with a small company building houses. I've done industrial maintenance. I've got my HVAC certifications. At one time I was pool certified. I've got an associate's degree in electronics. I've done pretty much everything from one end of the spectrum to the other. I worked at the Volkswagen plant in Chattanooga in assembly maintenance. I was an automation technician at a steel mill, and now I'm currently what they call the IE, or instrumentation and electrician frontline lead, for the finished products area at Georgetown Mill in South Carolina. With that background, I've done pretty much you name of it when it comes to. I've done everything from help clean apartments to scrub pools down. You were telling me, Alexa, that you had done gunite before. I helped prep one so that we could redo it. So we've done pretty much all that. Anything from plumbing, HVAC, electrical, you name it in the crafts trade. I've done pretty much all of it or been involved in it. Now I have 4 shift guys that work 24/7. And then I have a 12-man crew that works Monday through Friday, have the day crew as well for the finished products area. So I'm responsible for 3 paper machines. I've got a chem furnished stock prep area where they add the additives and stuff that go into the paper to make it more solid, or also to add the color. And then I also have what they call the PS&D area, which is package storage and distribution. So it comes in just as raw stock, and when it leaves us, it's actually on a truck or on a train car going out. So I'm responsible. I get some weekends off, but even then my shift guys will call me 24/7 if they've got questions or issues or dealing with things, on top of, the day-to-day stuff, the planned work that we have to deal with. So that's kind of in a rough nutshell. That kind of gives you a basic idea of what my normal week is like in some ways. So
yeah, that's quite the schedule, and always being kind of on call and being in that leadership position. Sometimes it is kind of hard to turn off, but we'll ask some more questions just about that last part in a second here.
Okay.
But
all right.
Yeah. Justin, you have a good memory too, Roland. I was telling him on our first call how it's crazy that so many people have some type of stint in the trades at some point in their life doing some type of manual labor. I think it is absolutely necessary. I told Justin I did pools for a day. I did roofing for a couple days. I was repairing a roof. They hoisted me up, and then I was like, maybe I should do something different. This seems dangerous, and I'm very clumsy. So I respect everyone who has had any type of career in the trades. Going back to your crazy schedule, Justin, and you told me a bunch of things about your day, and this was the thing that stuck out the most that really relates to our pros, is that it's pretty much identical, and you're on call every day, and you need to be there when your people need you. And as the owner, as the leader, you don't really have an option. But after a while of dealing with that, wanting to be home with your family, you told me a story that you had just gone home with your family and were there for 2 hours until you had to go out and leave again. You don't know when you came back home. But can you please give us some stories and tips on how you manage this type of schedule so as to not get burnt out or unhappy at work or at home?
Well, the story I was telling you about, we had a down day, meaning we took one of the paper machines down to do maintenance work on it. And I got home probably about 8:30 or 9 o'clock. And then about 10 o'clock, got a call from one of my shift technicians where one of our PLCs, a programmable logic controller, it's like a computer thing. It wasn't communicating with the other area, so it shut down one of our winders. And he called me and he said, I don't know how to set one up. So I talked to him for a minute. I got in the truck, took off, went back to work, and I called one of our IT guys because I'd never done it either. And so I called one that I knew could walk me through it. And then I took that technician, and me and him went to one of our calibration areas. We hooked power up to it and we walked through it together, because my thought on this, Alexa, was if I can walk through it with him, then he's going to know how to do it next time and won't need my help. But also I know how to do it, so next time I don't have to call somebody else. And then, but like you're saying, to keep from getting burnt out, long before that is keeping in the mindset of investing in others. That principle drives me on everything I do. Is I'm pouring into him and I'm helping him become a better technician, which means I'm going to have more time home with my family when he's there, because he's not going to need that outside help because he's been trained and knows what to do. And now out of my 4 shift guys, I've got 2 that are fairly new. So getting my crew's mindset in the same way of when those guys are on days, going with them on jobs if they have problems and helping pour into them. And I had to remind my crew a while back, a couple of them, when I first got there. I've been at International Paper for 5 years. When I first got there, I had a technician who had been there almost 20 years, and his mindset was, I'm going to get mine. I'm not worried about anybody else. I'm going to get mine. And I had to work with him and help him get the mindset of somebody trained him, somebody poured into him, so it's time to pay it forward. And now with my new guys, my associates, he is probably one of my best trainers on them, because he's one of my top technical people, but he's pouring into them on a day-to-day basis now. So helping each one of them get better and get stronger gives me a better chance to have more of a work-life balance that's winnable, I guess you'd say.
Sure.
So for the small business guy, being able to pour into his technicians or making sure that his customers are happy gives him that job satisfaction like Simon Sinek talks about, so that he can go home at night and feel satisfied.
Yeah. And obviously, getting someone to pay it forward versus like telling them they should, are 2 different things. What are some tactical tips, and maybe what are some of the conversations that you had to have with him to get him to realize that it was actually not only the right thing to do, but also would help benefit him much more so in the long run? I think that's typically like a difficult conversation to have. And I feel like any tips there our pros would really like.
So that is a really good question. And to answer that, when I first went there, I was given, quote unquote, the most experienced crew in the mill, which meant they were mostly the older guys who had been there for years, because my area is so complex. But that also meant they were set in their ways. And I bought into Simon Sinek's Start With Why a long time ago. And then I added some of Mac Story's blue collar leadership, and I actually walked my whole crew through blue collar leadership on my own. I saw what it did for me and how it helped me get better as a leader. And then I started giving it, I got a book for every one of the guys, and we did the book study together. And then, like you were saying, Roland, I started working through and helping them understand, why are we doing this? And this works for the guys that are self-employed, as well as the guys like me who are working for a bigger company right now, and Mac talks about in blue collar leadership, is I work for myself. I get my check from International Paper, but International Paper is my number 1 customer. If I make them happy, I'm going to continue to have a job. And once I started getting these guys to buy into the fact that they work for themselves and that this company gives them a check to help keep them going, and I worked really hard on the why. Why would it help this guy to pour into others? Well, in his case, he had kids. So it helped him realize that if this guy gets better equipped, he can have better time home with his kids, and less time getting called in. So my advice would be, figure out what your why is. Start with, like Simon says, start with why. Once they buy into the why, then you can get them to do the things that you need to do, or not necessarily that you get them to, that they have the desire then to do the things that will help propel the company and help propel the business.
I like that that perspective that you give to your team of yes, you work here, but you actually are your own boss. You work for yourself. And I think in some cases you could hear that and say, oh, they're just going to take off now. But if they take ownership over their role and thinking of the company that they're working for as their client, as their number one client, I could definitely see how there's a change in mindset there, in like really giving them ownership over their work. I liked that.
Well,
Yeah.
I've got one guy that's really, he had the stigma of being really pessimist about everything. And I used him as an example one day. I said, so if everybody out in this mill is your customer and I send you to the job and the next time we need something, they call me and say, send me somebody else, I don't want him coming back, then what happens to you? Because if nobody wants you to come work and do their things, then what good are you to the company or to your business? Because of your attitude or your work ethic or all that. So making each job count.
Yeah. And that goes back into something else that you said kind of in the pre-meeting with Alexa, which is, you stop living when you stop learning. And when you're on the job, you are looking for people on your team that just relentlessly want to learn, because those are the ones that keep kind of driving the business forward. And I think sometimes people start to lose the passion or the reason why they went even into business for themselves. But what kind of tips do you have, and what kind of areas of opportunity are there to keep not only yourself learning, but then also instill that within your team to always kind of keep learning?
Okay. Well, I used that life motto and I presented that to my crew. And now remember, I've got the most experienced crew in the mill. I've got guys that's been there 40 years. And I told them that and they said, well, we've learned everything here. And the very day that they said that, something else broke. And they're like, I've never seen that before. I'm like, but you said you knew it all. And for me, because I've been in this field 25 plus years now, I've realized that, even when I did HVAC and worked on that, it was a basic unit with a mercury filled thermostat. Now you're hooking them up to computers, or you can change one from your phone. Our fields are constantly getting more technical and getting more advanced. So pushing myself to learn those new techniques makes me more valuable. And for my team, helping to teach them the things that they need makes them more valuable. But you've got the ones who say, well, if I invest in them or if I pour into them, they're going to go somewhere else. Okay, you did your part to make them successful, which gives me satisfaction that even if they go somewhere else, they're going to be successful in life where they go because I had a part in them. I invested in them. But 9 times out of 10, if we're learning so that we can give, because remember, you can't give what you don't have. So if you're not learning and putting stuff in, you've got nothing to give out. And if you're giving stuff to them, 9 times out of 10, they're not going to go find another company, because why would you go somewhere else when you're getting trained and invested and poured into here? They're going to want to stay where somebody's helping them grow and get better. They're going to want a career there because this guy's taking the time out of his day to help me. And for those that are self-employed and they've got a small staff, that's one of the hardest things to deal with is staff turnover. When you have a small group of people, every time somebody leaves, that's a huge hole. And now the boss is carrying the radio an additional day, or, he's having to answer more calls than he would before because he just lost somebody. Well, if he's pouring into them and building them, they're not going to leave as much. And if they do, that you can say, hey, I helped him be successful. And now I can go home and sleep because I did everything I could to take care of that person.
Absolutely. And what is something that you do, Justin, to put this into practice? Because with all mottos, it's a lot easier said and done, and sometimes it's not exactly the easiest to apply. What do you do so that you are constantly learning every single day?
Well, for me, every day we have 500 meetings daily. Everybody in the business world, you're constantly got meetings, but I actually have a spreadsheet that I work off each day that has this. And I was trying to remember the guy's name. He's with the John Maxwell team that put together this daily agenda, and it talks about big stones and little stones. And I modified a little bit and have my big goals and my small goals. My big goals, and I put personal goals in there. I put professional goals in there and things. And one of them that I put in there and I ask myself every day is, did I spend time reading leadership? Did I spend time investing in myself? And then I use my commute, my drive to and from work. If I drive in the morning, I'm listening to podcasts, or I'm listening to something that's going to build me and help me. So making that mental mindset of saying, this is what I'm going to do each day so that I can make those small gains, that compound effect, those little bits go a long ways over the course of time. So
yeah, I feel like a lot of our pros, they spend a lot of time in the trucks, driving around and things like that. And it's really easy to, listen to music. It's really easy, to kind of forget what's going on. It's really easy to listen to talk radio, that really is just kind of like trash talk radio. And it's entertaining because it's always different, but in reality, that time could be so much better spent listening to a podcast that's helping you learn something new, to help you learn new leadership skills, to listen to other people. I mean, obviously we put together Protalks here to help our pros, be exposed to more ideas beyond just maybe what they would ordinarily find in their normal day-to-day, work on their business. But I feel like that is a very simple, tangible tip that our pros could do, is like, if you find yourself listening to music, if you find yourself listening to trash radio or talk radio, I should put, or sports radio, spend some time and invest it in yourself. You've got plenty of time to go maybe watch TV like after you finish dinner or something like that, but don't spend that time on that. Spend your time investing in yourself.
Justin, I'm sorry.
Let me add one thing with that I just thought about. The other thing, Roland, that kind of goes with that is make yourself accountable. Whether it be to your spouse or to a best friend, or find somebody like-minded that wants to grow and start, whether it's a once a week meeting or something like that, where you're holding each other accountable, and give them the right and the authority to say, hey, did you grow today? Have you invested in yourself this week, and how? Not just did you, yes or no, because then it's shut down. The open-ended question, how did you invest in yourself this week? Mm-hmm. What have you done to get yourself better? Make yourself accountable, because if you're just accountable to you, we'll lie to ourselves sometimes, just a little bit. Maybe tomorrow, I didn't have time today.
I like to call those accountability buddies.
Yep, that's good.
I have a lot of them, whether it's for fitness, whether it's for personal development, business growth. It's always good to have a friend or it's a partner who's on the same page as you. My question for you, Justin, since you are constantly learning, if you had any suggestions for podcasts on personal development or leadership skills, or whatever else you listen to, what would you suggest for our pros here?
Well, I listen to a variety of things. I listen to, which you already picked up on it. I listen to Mac Stories stuff, John Maxwell's things, Gary Chapman, with the Barry Waymiller Company, Simon Sinek. There's I'm trying to think of some of the names. There's so many different ones that I listen to. Wow. I didn't see that one coming. I would have wrote some of those down, but a lot of that I put in, leadership development, or I put in, personal growth and listen to those. But, those are some of the main ones that I listen to. And then I try to glean some of the stuff from them, and then see what, some of the other guys have got to say that add to that as well.
Yeah. I also feel like it doesn't have to be necessarily even industry specific. So you can listen to things outside of your industry, because oftentimes a lot of things you'll learn in other industries, you can actually apply to your own industry. And it's a great way to kind of steal methodologies from other sides that are working for other types of businesses. Simon Sinek's A Bit of Optimism is the fun listen to. I'm just like looking at my, literally like looking at some of these ones here, the Dave Ramsey Show, Exponent. I like listening to Freakonomics. I'm an econ major, but that's a really cool one, Freakonomics. Here's a fun one, Giant Robots Smashing into Other Giant Robots. It's called ThoughtBot. Just random things like that. There's always things that you can pull from these kind of podcasts, but listen to them, because there's definitely going to be ideas in here that you can go use on your business or on yourself from a personal growth development perspective too.
Yeah, I like that, where you're saying you don't have to just stay in your if you're an HVAC guy, you don't just listen to HVAC stuff, because there's stuff on the electrical side that can help you, but the leadership and the business development side as well. Ed Milet's another one that I listen to a lot of times, and listen to some of his stuff. I think his is called Maxing Out with Ed Milet. So several of those like that, just to help me get better or to encourage me. Had a rough day at work, I listen to some of that stuff to encourage me. That's like, it's okay, keep going. Things are going to be better tomorrow. Less issues, hopefully.
So that's our challenge to you for all of our pros, because we hope that you're listening to this in your truck or you're watching it when you have a couple spare minutes at the office. But go and find a new podcast or a book that maybe isn't in the same lane as your industry and add it to your list. I'm looking at mine. I have a lot of productivity ones. I have Mad Money, and a lot of that like motivational type stuff, side hustle stuff. And How I Built This is for sure my favorite podcast ever. If you want to be inspired by other business owners, that's great for anyone too. So go find a new podcast and apply something from that you learned from it into your life. Tell us what it is.
Yeah. I think a lot of our pros too, and they all have other sources of kind of like inspiration, things like that. And I think, you get a lot of that from, the religious and the spiritual side of what you do. How does that incorporate kind of into your team and your business life, or do you keep them separate?
I don't think you can separate them 100% because me being a Christian and being a preacher, that plays into how I act and how I think on things and how I respond, and trying to be that example. So that kind of drives me on a lot of things where, a lot of people will get upset and they'll fly off the handle and they'll cuss somebody out or whatever. Well, for a business person, you can't do that, number one. Yeah. And letting that be a driving force inside of me and think, how should I respond in a way that is a good example for them? And that directs me in a lot of things of how I do things. But at the same time, also the ability to just be real. It drives me to be real and let people see someone who's real and who's genuine, not someone who is just putting on a face or just putting on a facade. Mm-hmm. And, a lot of people see that in bosses and stuff. And they're like, well, that's not who they really are. And just trying to be the same person all the time.
I like that a lot.
Are there any similarities that you take kind of the from the preaching side of what you do to helping employees understand things or motivating people? Is there anything that would be helpful for our pros to kind of understand our techniques that you use, or certain types of stories that you tell to help kind of inspire their teams?
That's a good question.
Well, absolutely. Yeah, very good question. Being a preacher, we're in the mindset and thought of trying to break things down so that anybody can get it. But at the same time, when you do that, you want it where you're, as we call it, a young believer and an experienced believer, somebody who's been saved for a long time. Both of them can get it and continue to move forward. So one of my strengths is encouragement. So I use that to try to encourage and challenge people, and constantly, and being a preacher, that pushes me constantly to try to, get people, keep them driving and keep them moving forward. Because as John Maxwell teaches, he talks about motivation and he talks about momentum. Momentum's being one of your biggest things, and using my gift and my calling also with my area at work and all gives me that ability to try to constantly be pushing and encouraging momentum and encouraging people to keep stepping up, keep moving forward. But at the same time, it also gives me the ability gives me the drive to constantly be encouraging people when I see them do something good. And it drives them crazy when I do it, because they're like, well, that's just my job. Well, no, you did more than your job, because your job was just to fix this, but you made sure it was done so that we don't have that again. So encouragement going with that.
Mm-hmm. Breaking it down. I really like how you apply to break it down into simple steps, no matter what you're talking about. But you also probably have to have a fair amount of patience all the time, which probably helps you a lot, especially with your crazy schedule and the team of people that you have, no matter how seasoned they are, and constantly keeping them motivated. You have to show up that way too as a leader. So I can definitely see how that part of your life impacts the work side of your life.
Very much so. And I'm the go-between. I tell the crew when we've got a problem, I'm the go-between. I'm the one that stands in the line between them and production. Production wants it fixed now and back up going, and they don't care what we got to do. And my guys are trying to think through what's going on. So I'm playing that buffer, and I have to use patience with one group and motivation and courage with the other. But at the same time, I have to constantly be asking my crew questions. I don't have to know all the answers of how to fix it. I just have to ask questions to spur them to keep going. while I'm keeping the other group satisfied that, hey, we're fixing your problem and we're going to make it right. We're going to make it right. But you're right. I mean, I have to constantly be encouraging myself and motivating myself. And I've got a good support group that helps me with that, from my wife and kids to my pastor and friends in the ministry as well.
So we talked a little bit about one thing that I just picked out from what you said is, something John Maxwell talks a lot about, which is like momentum makers and momentum breakers, so kind of an example would be potentially like, momentum breaker would be like looking to the past versus momentum maker, looking something in the future. Are there any other kind of momentum breakers or makers that you think are really vital for our pros to kind of think about as they go through interacting with their teams?
Constantly looking for momentum. Can't remember the word you just used, not breakers, but momentum makers. That was it. Looking for those momentum makers, because once you start getting some momentum, you got to constantly be pushing to keep it going, because, I mean, we all know you start rolling a ball, it's going to stop if you don't keep it going. But avoiding the momentum breakers, be thinking ahead, okay, well, what could be a momentum breaker? Could it be that the technicians I'm sending out may not have all the tools they need, or they may need to be given this to help them learn how to do this job? Or maybe a momentum is I put an experienced guy with an inexperienced guy, and I talk to the experienced guy first and say, this guy knows a little bit, so encourage him and let him do more of it so that it builds his, because what it does when you do that is you're building momentum, because the experienced guy realizes his role as a mentor, and the other guy gets confidence, and he gets the confidence and boldness because he knows, A, the boss is behind him, but he also knows this guy that's experienced is working with him. So I think it's thinking through the steps before you put people on stuff and saying, okay, is this going to be a breaker or a maker? And if it's going to be a breaker, what can I do to avoid that? And the worst thing you want to do is be one of those that you're working by the seat of your pants at the last minute, because then it's easy to make bad decisions or easy to make make mistakes because you didn't think through all the steps, and trying to plan things out in advance and saying, okay, I've got this, this, and this. Here's what's going to happen if I put this guy on there, but if I put this one with him, I'm going to get extra gain out of it because he's going to be pouring into him and he's going to get encouraged and confidence. And confidence helps a lot with momentum as your team gets confidence in each other. Mm-hmm. And helping them come around and rally around each other when there are big problems. Yeah. But one of the things that we do I've been doing every morning is we have a morning safety meeting, but we also talk about the jobs from the day before. So I've called on the experienced guys and say, hey, what happened yesterday? What did you do? And what can we do better next time? So they're sharing knowledge with everybody. So it kind of helps build some cohesiveness amongst the team as well.
Yep. And I think kind of the final loop there on momentum breaker and makers is the difference between ingratitude and gratitude. So, when something is completed, it could be a big project, could be a particular HVAC install, it could be whatever it is, but then kind of expressing that gratitude to then make it much more likely for your colleagues, your coworkers to do it again. To see that you're expressing that towards them really goes a long way towards keeping that momentum going continuously. Like you said, that ball will stop rolling just because of friction and gravity, and that putting that gratitude piece at the end of it is definitely a momentum maker, and it keeps that ball rolling.
Absolutely. And you're right. When you get done with a big project, we had a big drives project about 2 years ago where we were upgrading some almost 30-year-old drives, some DC motor drives, and they were the old analog stuff. So it was like the dials and stuff that you were having to watch, and we put digital front ends on there. And one technician took ownership of it, and one of the things that he applauded me about was I kept everybody away from him because they were trying to pull him onto other jobs because he was really good. And at the end of it, we made sure as a crew to recognize his efforts. And we went a step above that and gave him a chance to walk through that with some of the other technicians and show them what they did, what he learned, and what he knew about them, so that it gave him a chance to turn around and invest in them. And that one got a promotion since then, and now he's my reliability engineer. And he's pouring into others more so every day than he did before. So
Yeah, that's a great example of how that works out. And obviously, being as a leader, you need to be able to kind of remove blockers from people, but also block them from people to get the things done that will kind of get them to the next level. And that's a good example of something that you were able to do to help that actually complete and get
Roland,
to the finish line.
Roland does that to me all the time. You're saying empower them, but block them from certain people so they can get the things done. I see you. Justin, you've given us so many great stories over this past interview, especially on how to navigate having an incredibly busy schedule, trying to lead and inspire a team while also just being on call all the time and trying to balance your family life as well. Up until how do you keep on learning in a career you've been in for 20, 30, 40 years when it may get stale, and how to keep challenging yourself. And these are all things that our pros face daily. So I hope everyone here goes and takes those pieces of advice and applies them. Our last question for you is, what words of encouragement do you have for our pros who are maybe struggling with that balancing act of being on all the time, or trying to find inspiration in their job again, or inspire others?
I think it would go back to look for somebody to invest in. Look at the ones around you, the ones that, if you've got one or two employees, look for the ones that you can invest in, because you may not see the immediate result, but you'll start seeing the long-term result. And the more you invest in them, once again, the more your work-life balance can get back into scale, because they can handle more load as you build them. And if you're getting burnt out, if you're getting down, work with them, but also give yourself a chance to try to unwind sometime. Make sure that you're taking the time that you need to pour into you. And whether it's a podcast or something that's encouraging, or just getting alone for a few minutes and just having that time to just let things soak out and just release things, and sit down and talk with them about what's going on, and share your load with them, share the burden with them, and say, here's where we're at, here's what I need from you. And when they see your heart, then they're going to start seeing that, hey, I can help him, I can do this. And, be investing in others. I think the key for me has been constantly looking for people to invest in. It makes it hard for me to get burnt out when I see somebody excelling, or see somebody doing better or getting better at something, because I've had a part in pouring into them.
That's super helpful. And I feel like sometimes people are afraid of over-investing, and having someone fly the coop, so to speak. But irrespective, you gain so much personal satisfaction out of them being successful, regardless of where they are. That is truly how you need to do it, and do it without expectation of reward or anything. Do it just because you want to invest, and everything else will turn out the right way. Thank you so much for spending time with us today, Justin, for sharing so many wonderful tips, so many actionable insights. And for our pros, we'll be on next week. Thanks again.
Thank you very much. I've enjoyed it.
Justin. We love talking to you. We'll talk to you soon. Bye.
Bye, guys.
Bye.
Thanks for tuning in to this week's episode. Look forward to seeing you next week. For more information, go to housecallpro.com/Protalks.